First of all, thank you all for joining us for our first of three works in process talks here at the Guggenheim this season, which is one more than the usual two. That's because the Met has more new works and therefore more new processes to reveal than at any other time in recent Met history. It's not just that we're gluttons for punishment. We're actually interested in the survival of our art form, and it's through revitalizing the art form with new experiences that that path shall be won. For those of you who know that Medea was composed by Cherubini at the end of the 18th century, you might not consider it to be exactly new, but it's new to the Met, and so that counts. My illustrious predecessor, Rudolf Bing, tried to bring Medea and Maria Callas, the diva who previously owned the role, to the Met in the 60s, but it's no secret that Bing and Callas didn't get along very well, so it never happened. It probably didn't help that Bing also threatened, actually did fire Callas on one occasion. It's only now with one of the world's leading dramatic sopranos, who is in the prime of her career, Sondra Radvanovsky, that we have found I'm sure Sondra can hear you back there, and it's heartening for her, that we finally found the right opportunity to bring Medea to the Met. The premiere next week will be Sondra's debut singing this role on any stage, and since you will be hearing her very first public performance of a few parts of Medea tonight, that makes this Works in Process a very special event indeed. You know, when we first planned to open our 2022-23 season with a new production of Medea several years ago, we didn't know that the Supreme Court was going to overturn Roe versus Wade, nor did we know that the Taliban would be back in power and that Afghan women would be denied, once again, their basic human rights. Women of today are rightfully enraged by these medieval developments, which makes the story of Medea, the sorceress who is betrayed by men and who subsequently summons all of her mythic power to get even in a big way, all the more timely. Sondra and two of her very gifted co-stars, Janai Brugger and Matthew Polenzani, will be performing and also joining to talk about the opera with us. But first we're going to hear from Medea's creative dynamic duo, its legendary stage director and conductor. To my right is the director who is currently working on his 12th production for the Met. 12th. 12th. Right, I thought your 13th was Fedora.
Oh, yes.
That's coming up next in a few months. We're not counting. Actually, we are counting because this officially makes David the more prolific director at the Met than even Franco Zeffirelli. David's first Met production, in fact, was Verdi's Il Trovatore in 2009, and his most recent was the same composer's Don Carlos in the French version that we did just last season and which we'll be doing in Italian later this season. In the case of Medea, he is the set designer as well, and he'll be talking about the production in a few moments. Please welcome one of our most brilliant theatrical artists, director Sir David McVicar. Next to David is a maestro who has been performing at the Met for nearly 30 years. Having made his company debut in 1993, conducting Zeffirelli's inexpugnable production of La Bohème. Or at least on my watch. As a native of Milan, it makes sense that he is a regular on the podium of La Scala, but he also performs at all the world's leading houses, including Covent Garden, the Paris Opera, Teatro Real in Madrid, Lyric Opera of Chicago, amongst many others. And for a number of years, he was the music director of the Welsh National Opera. and he's led more than 225 performances at the Met. Please welcome Carlo Rizzi. So, David, what makes Medea an appealing opera to direct?
This is really my kind of thing. I'm really interested in super dramatic stories. The Medea myth is deeply interesting to me. I previously directed another operatic treatment of it because at the end of the 17th century, the French composer Charpentier did a version of Medea, which I've also directed. So that was a kind of like dress rehearsal for taking on the Cherubini version of this story. But I'm also, with my training as an actor, was very interested in Euripides' original version of the story. And also I'm very interested in how the story transmutes and changes according to the period in which it's being retold. That's true of all myth. It's like we take a myth, we make of it what we want it to be. And we always use myth as a mirror to ourselves. And some of the things that Peter was mentioning a couple of minutes ago certainly were a spur to creating this production, because the politics of Medea is something which is inescapable, and the current mirror that Medea is throwing up to the world and to our societies is particularly black and poisonous. And that was really one of the reasons that I'm so enthused about doing this production at this time. Also, I'm just really at home with this music. I'm really at home with the moment when the classical world becomes the romantic world, not only in music, but in art and in the history of that world. And it's something that's very interesting to me. So yeah, I'm on home ground doing this. Also, it's very violent stuff. I'm not suggesting I'm on home ground with that very violent stuff, but I really do like directing female performers. I really do like directing Sondra. We've done a great deal together. And the challenge of pushing her to such extremes was, not something I'm going to, I'm not going to pass that by.
Well, we'll talk a lot more about that when Sondra's up on the stage too. But and Carlo, I'm sure you'll want to talk about the musical style and this interesting transition between classicism and romanticism. But before we do that, just to give the audience a sense, you mentioned the word mirror several times, and in fact, a mirror plays very prominently in the set that you've designed as well as stage. So why don't we look at a couple of images from rehearsals from last week, that's the show curtain. And maybe you could describe, just tell us a little bit about your set and scenery and how it supports the plot.
I did that on my kitchen table, that painting, so that's lovely to see that. I actually designed this production during lockdown. It was a very strange experience because we couldn't make contact with anyone. And one of the reasons that I actually took on the design of this production myself was I simply couldn't travel and meet designers. So one obvious solution was, I'll do it. I've designed a few things in the past, so I just decided to do it myself. I didn't do the costumes, though.
You designed Roberto Devereux at the Met.
I did design Roberto Devereux at the Met. I've designed other stuff too, but I didn't do the costumes to this one. Doe Lucy did the costumes, and they're very, very beautiful. Oh, you're going too fast. Go back, go back, go back, go back, go back. Because of the sound of the music, we chose to costume the world in the time of composition, 1797, which is the Directoire period in French history, just after the Reign of Terror. Something fascinating about the music. Medea begins with this incredibly stormy overture and ends with this incredibly dark and violent third act finale. it's not only about the story of Medea. You have to consider that Cherubini had survived the Reign of Terror, and so had his audience. And all the political upheavals and all the bloodshed that they had witnessed is somehow, for me, encapsulated in the music of this opera. And in a way, it's a trauma which is being expressed in Cherubini's Medea. The possibility that everything can end in terror and bloodshed. Okay, so there's King Creon, which was Michele Pertusi.
And that was Glauce before.
That was Glauce, that's the princess. She comes to a sticky end.
In the previous, in the earlier photo, go back to that for one more second.
So this is Janai as Glauce, surrounded by her handmaidens.
Who you'll be hearing shortly.
She, unfortunately, does come to a very sticky end. And she is very sticky afterwards. We need to clean her up a lot for the curtain call. Anyway, we can move forward, I imagine. Michele is King Creon. One of the things about the Corinthian society is that they're very pleased with themselves. They're very satisfied with themselves. They've struck a really good bargain with Jason. They've got hold of the golden fleece, which is the most precious object in the world and bestows good fortune on whichever country possesses it. And they're quite happy to marginalize Medea and to keep her in the background. They're so sort of like happy with their civilization, they don't even regard Medea's magical powers as being much of a threat to them. The only person who's prescient about this is actually Glauce, who has really, really good witchy sense, and she really senses that something wicked is coming. And we need to be careful, and this is not what this marriage, as much as I love Jason, is fundamentally not right. We can move on.
That's Jason with her.
That's Matthew as Jason. And here's a presentation of the Golden Fleece to Glauce by the Argonauts. The mirror, there's Sondra getting very angry at Jason in that picture. She spends a lot of time being very, very angry. It's sort of like this role, it's sort of like why it's such a killer role, why this opera is so hard to mount is the sheer demands that it places on the soprano who sings the role. It's a little bit like doing Hamlet. Once you've hit the stage, you don't leave it and you never shut up. And it is an extraordinary tour de force for any soprano which is singing this role. We can move forward, I think. We can move forward. Yeah, here we see Medea is cursing the golden diadem bequeathed by her grandfather, the sun god, Helios, which she's going to give to Glauce, which is going to enact the first stage of her vengeance against Jason's betrayal. We can move on. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with this, actually. This is the wedding scene. It's an extraordinary sequence where Medea and her confidant Neris are listening in to the marriage ceremony of Jason and Glauce, which is normally happening off stage, but we've chosen to open up the stage and actually reveal what's going on inside the temple. Cherubini, in his late life, he had an extraordinarily long life. I mean, this is a man who was born a contemporary of Mozart and died a contemporary of Verdi and Wagner, which is pretty extraordinary. And he ended up the director of the Paris Conservatoire of Music, where he came into great conflict with people like Hector Berlioz. And yet, in this finale to the second act, there's an extraordinary pre-echo of the finale of the first act of Les Troyens, where Cassandra is listening to the Trojans, and sometimes it's uncannily similar in terms of his construction and his music. Do you know what I'm talking about, Carlo? Yeah. So this is also, the mirror is an image of the self-regarding nature of the Corinthians, how secure they feel that catastrophe cannot come to them. So that's basically what it's about, but the mirror also gives us lots of other things that we can play with, which I don't want to give too much away about, actually. Can we move on? Yeah, she's getting pretty mad now. Yeah, can we move on? Yeah, she's getting mad. this is the third act is really the most testing part of the opera for the Medea, because she is, for around 25 minutes, almost alone on stage, controlling the stage, and including the audience in the mental processes which are leading her to the ultimate act of vengeance, which of course is the murder of her own and Jason's children, which, going back to the ancient Greek sources, to Euripides, to an Athenian man, to lose his bloodline, to lose his children, for that to be cancelled, it's the ultimate cancellation of that man's existence. And it's why politically Medea is so subversive and so shocking. There are many scholars who argue that in the ancient Greek theatre, the audience could not contain women, because women's roles were very prescribed in ancient Athenian society. And there's a lot of conjecture about, were they actually in the audience? One of the arguments for them not being in the audience is something as sort of incendiary as Euripides' version of Medea, because Euripides is the first writer to actually invent the strand of the legend that she kills the children as the final act of vengeance, totally emasculating Jason as the ultimate revenge. It's very potent stuff. Are we done, or is there more? No, we're done. There you go.
Well done. So, Carlo, maybe you could get into the music itself and tell us about the music and this period. As David said, it was very, very end of the 18th century when it was composed.
Yes. Yeah. So Cherubini is a composer of transitions between, as you've heard, he was born in an era and he died in a different era. The thing about Medea is that what we have from the point of view of the form, of the way in which Cherubini writes, sometimes is we could think of Cherubini looking a little bit at the past. But if we look then at the way that this material is used, is definitely toward the future. I mean, for example, let's just say the orchestra. The orchestra is a very, very simple orchestration. There are only strings, horns, and timpani. There are no trumpets, there are no trombones. The woodwinds are, double woodwinds. So it's in a way, it's not in a big orchestra. But the way that Cherubini has to use these forces is incredible. When you will hear, because all of you are coming correct to the performance, yes. When you will hear, already the first notes of the overture, you will feel transported in a world that is an uneasy world. It's not a nice overture. You are immediately, like this. And we are not saying that the kind of sound is something like Mahler or Bruckner. Absolutely not. It's a very simple classical sound, but with an incredible force inside. And this is the force that drives the music of Cherubini from the beginning of the first note of the overture to the end. The end, for example, also is a very fantastic and a very interesting end. Doesn't finish with an aria, doesn't finish with a big chorus. It's just the orchestra that speaks about the dissolvement, the destruction of that Medea provoked. And also here we can hear scales, arpeggios. One could think about Vivaldi technically, about what is there, but the content is much, much, much more later. Beethoven, I mean, this is a famous story. Beethoven owned a copy of the score of Medea. And actually, if you think about the way that Beethoven writes, for example, in his Fidelio, or even in the Ninth Symphony for the voices, sometimes it's similar of what Cherubini does. Now I want to talk a moment about this, because You know, very often when we go to an opera, we come out and we have in mind 3 arias, 2 duets, maybe a big chorus, va pensiero, and this is the part that we remember of the opera. Now, of course, in this aria, in this opera, there is an overture, there are arias, there are duets, the chorus have a very prominent part, but what actually makes this opera special is the the unity of all this. You will not come out just thinking, oh, this is what we remember of Medea. You will remember Medea. You will remember the opera. And this, I think, is something very, very important to remember. Don't look for the top C of the soprano, of the quella pira. I mean, there are a lot of high notes, trust me. It's not an easy part to sing, but you will come out with a full experience. Now, the opera is called Medea. Medea is the protagonist. And what David was saying about what inspired him about the role of Medea, I completely concur with this. But interestingly, the good thing that directors, they have a carte blanche where they can paint what they want. The poor conductors, they have the score where the notes are written. Ay, 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 ay. So they have to interpret what is written. I'm joking, because actually it's fantastic to interpret what is written. And also in this case, I'm talking about the role of Medea, particularly because it's the more polyedric character of all the 3 major characters. Medea is not a one-way person. Is not just the witch that come here at the beginning, start to scream, and then they kill 2 children and Glauce. Is a very tormented person. Let me give you an example. In the 3rd act, that is actually a tour de force for Medea, and Sandra is fantastic in this. But in the 3rd act, there is the aria where she talks to her children, about her children, and in the space of, I think, 3-4 minutes of aria, she changed feeling toward the children 1, 2, 3, 4 times. First she say, I love you. Then, no, actually, I don't love you, I want to kill you. Then, how can I kill you? I love you. Oh, but wait a minute, you remind me of him, of Giasone. So let's kill you. Is incredible, because in these 4 minutes, 5 minutes, there is so much richness in the words, of course, in the psychology of the personaggio, but this translates also in the way that Cherubini used the music. And the good thing, in a way, this is the first time that everybody has done Medea, not only the Met, but all the cast, orchestra, chorus, director, and conductor. And it's been fantastic, I think, this way of working, because it's not that we came with our gospel of, okay, now we are going to do this, you go to the left, you go to the right. But it's been a real discovery for everybody. And this is what it must have been, for unknown operas at the time, the first time that was done. And I'm so happy that you've been able to do it in this great theater, in 2022. I mean, I can go on forever, but probably is enough. What do you think?
You're doing very well. That's great. I think though, what we should do now is hear some music.
Absolutely.
Since we've been talking about it. So, mezzo-soprano Janai Brugger most recently was heard on the Met stage in a completely opposite role, the role of Clara in Porgy and Bess last season. In Medea, as we know, she performs the role of Glauce, which both of you have spoken about. And she'll be singing Glauce's Act 1 aria, O Amore Vieni a Me. And maybe, do you want to just, one of you perhaps could say what this aria is about?
Yes, so Glauce is getting married to Giasone. Actually, the interesting thing that the two ladies, have you seen when Glauce was in the marriage dress, in the white dress, and there were two ladies on the other side, and these are the two ancelle, the two confidante, and the opera starts actually with one of them saying, "What on earth is happening? You're going to get married. Why are you so unhappy?" And so she say, I'm unhappy because she knows that there is this shadow of Medea, in the past of Giasone, etc., etc. Now in this area, what she invoked the god of love. Love come to me, come into my heart. But again, even in this area, there is a moment that you will hear at a certain point where she is agitated still again about Medea. So also here we don't have a sort of nice walk in the park about all the brides that we see actually in Central Park, doing the pictures after a wonderful ceremony. Is a very tormented aria. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So here now, ladies and gentlemen, is soprano Janai Brugger, accompanied by Met pianist and assistant conductor Howard Watkins. Please welcome them now. Beautiful, and Janai will join us in a little while after the other performances that we're about to hear in a moment. We're going to hear Medea's aria and also the duet of Medea and Giasone. First, we're going to hear Medea's great aria, De tuoi figli la madre, followed immediately by the Medea-Giasone duet, Nemici senza cor. These two artists, Sondra and Matthew Polenzani, are two of the Met's most illustrious stars. They both made their debuts sort of back-to-back in Sondra's case in 1996, in Matthew's case in 1997. They've starred in hundreds of Met performances. Each have created multiple new productions and multiple new roles. Would you like to say, David or Carlo, anything about the aria and the duet?
See, one thing that is important to understand, to know, is that Medea, as I was saying, have this very different form she takes, one of which is deception. She very often uses her voice, her art, to try to deceive people. Giasone, in fact, she's trying to get him back, and she's using the children. You know, now in this moment in her aria, she will complain the fact that she loves her children, but that she cannot see her children because Giasone forbidden her to see the children, etc., etc. And then in the duetto, then there is a big fight with Giasone. But later on, and also with King Creonte, Medea very often is a deceitful person. And we can hear this in the music. This is very interesting, just 2 seconds. So you can hear a really beautiful line in the voice of Medea, pleading. Please, please, please. But in the orchestra, it's not just simple accompanimento, you know, it's not just un pa pa pa, un pa pa pa. You have the viole and the second violin. This, to me, is a genius way of Cherubini to tell us that what we hear from Medea is actually not the truth. And so also in this aria, when she sings about her children that she loves, etc., is not completely true. She wants to arrive to the point that is revenge, and she uses every possible mean that she has at disposition, that is her beauty, the love for that Giasone had for her, and her children.
David, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't have anything to say, except there is also another aspect to this, which is, me and Sondra talked a lot about this during rehearsal, that there are actually multiple personalities, literally multiple personalities at war within the soul of Medea. She is not just a witch, but she is a mother, and she is a loving and abandoned woman who has lost her senses with this incredible passion that she has developed for Jason. And she has helped him achieve everything in his career, to achieve fame, to achieve power, to achieve possession of the Golden Fleece, the most precious talisman in the Grecian world. And she's continually at conflict with these differing sides of her nature, which at sometimes, and Cherubini writes this so well, seem to be almost talking directly to each other. And part of her struggle throughout the 3 acts until she commits the murder of the children is how to resolve the conflict between voices inside her head. Which personality is going to win? Is it going to be the mother? Is it going to be the scorned woman? Or is it going to be the vengeful witch? But what is the witch? Is the witch necessarily evil? The witch may do something evil, but she's been pushed against the wall into a corner. She feels that she sort of has no options. These are the many, many fascinating facets and aspects of Medea's character, and one of the challenges of coming to grips with her.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now, please welcome Sondra Radvanovsky, accompanied by Howard Watkins once again, and Matthew Polenzani will join Sondra after she has sung her aria.
By saying, this is the only time I'm really happy in the opera, so don't get used to it.
pace, preghi, vuol, va via di qui, Creonte minaccio, rammenti il suo parlar. Medea t'aspetta all'alba al tavolo di Glauce mia diletta.
Dici senza cor, astuta mia re, e mi straccia volete. E eccoli qui, io chiamo testimon, ti giuro io vorrei, questo è il traditor, ora per dire, no, no, io ne penso di che, per dire io potrò vedere questo è me, non sarò io lo giuro di dire, giuro gli dei, questo è me, non sarò.
Fate un nome di Calais, la feral sua minaccia, servate immune ognor, da sue vendette il re. Reggia il sacro sol, a lei salvate ognor, o lei salvate ognor.
Di sangue
castigo aspetta, tempa di qui, il tuo castigo aspetta.
Sì,
great. So that was the, since you were all new to these roles, that was the first time you've sung anything in public from this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for not telling us that beforehand.
Really?
How did it feel?
Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's exciting. This
exciting.
this duet's really exciting. Actually, I like it. It's very hot, and we didn't give you any of the. We just gave you the looks. We didn't give you any of the real stuff, you know. So it's pretty good. Yeah, buy a ticket. That's right.
You know, of all the tour de force roles, Sondra, that you have sung at the Met, from the Three Queens and Donizetti to what else? Norma. That's a pretty big one. Pretty big one. How does this role, or is it too soon for you to say? How does this role compare to those?
It's unlike any other role I've sung before, truly. Not just vocally, because it's a completely different vocal style than anything I've done. It was written in French, as most of you probably know, and so it's a lot of the déclamation and all of that. The text is so important. But also, the journey that she takes in this opera is truly unlike any other journey I've taken with any other character, including Norma, which I did also with David McVicar. So,
At the Met?
At the Met. With him. Oh, hey, that's right. Dream team.
The team has been reunited.
Hashtag. So yeah, it's exhausting, emotionally, physically, mentally exhausting. By the end of the night, the first time we did it with orchestra was Thursday, and I allowed myself to really go there emotionally for the first time. And it took me 3 hours afterwards. I just sat and cried. Because, you know, I'll tell you what happens at the end. The kids die. And sorry, didn't mean to give it away, but you know, the strength that it takes for a human being. And I remember Matthew, the first day that being a father, which I have no children, but he was just destroyed. And he was only watching it. So, yeah, it's unlike anything I've ever done before. And I might need some therapy lessons after this, Peter.
You can work it all out on the stage. You mentioned the fact that it was written in French, but you're singing it in Italian, and I don't think we explained that earlier, that the opera, or did you explain it? I don't think so. The opera was written in French and with spoken dialogue, and then it was like 75 years later that it was, an Italian version was done, long after Cherubini had, no? Tell me, you're the expert.
Okay, it's a bit of a story. So it was written as an opera comique in French in 1797 with dialogues. It was then, it wasn't actually a great success in Paris, but it became very successful in Germany in 2 different German translations, where it was done as Singspiel. And there was a very successful production at Covent Garden in London in the 1860s, where for the first time it was performed in Italian translation with recitatives by the conductor, who's Luigi Arditi. And then Franz Lachner, who was in his time a very famous composer in mid-19th century Germany, he created a German version with recitative. So are you bearing with me? That version was very, very popular. At several points during the journey of this opera, Cherubini, for example, had been involved in a production in 18, help me, Carlo. Something like 1813, where he cut about an hour's worth of music out of it, and that became the standard version that later productions followed. Fast forward to 1909, there was a new edition commissioned for a production at La Scala Milan for a soprano called Esther Mazzoleni. Check her out on YouTube. She was great. She was sort of like the Callas of her time. She enjoyed a very similar repertoire. She sang Isolde and Norma at the same time. And this edition was created for her. It's called the Carlo Zangarini edition, but he wasn't a musician. He was actually a librettist and a director, actually a very early film director. And he translated, again, into Italian, but not from the French, from the German. Okay, the musical spade work for that edition was a young conductor by the name of Tullio Serafin, who, of course, goes on to become the mentor of Maria Callas. And so when Callas takes on the role in the early 50s, it's under the guidance of Tullio Serafin, although he didn't actually conduct her in those early performances, but it was absolutely his idea, because after Esther, he felt that he'd found another soprano who should do this, who can do this. So the version that we are doing is, to the viewpoint of many musicologists, a very corrupt version, a sort of bastardized version of the original.
That's okay.
But the thing is, the thing about musicologists is it's in their interest to do original versions because they do critical editions and make money. The thing is, we have both versions. Both versions are at our fingertips. You have to think about the house where you're presenting it. You have to think about the casting. You have to think about the expectations of the audience. Frankly, I think to do the original French version with dialogues, which I have seen performed in the theatre twice, you would need a theatre the size of the Opera Comique in Paris. You would need a francophone cast, and I think you would need about 8 weeks of rehearsal to actually pull it off, because the singers that this was actually written for in the original French version don't even exist in France anymore.
And Sondra wouldn't have sung it in French.
Thank you for throwing me under the bus. Yes, I think the Metropolitan Opera is too large of an opera house to have spoken dialogue, personally. I think that spoken dialogue is for a more intimate situation like this. And plus also being a bit selfish, then I would have to wear a microphone. And you probably have all seen pictures of that costume. There's no place to put a microphone. So, no, and also Italian is the language that I speak.
No, I just want to say from the point of view, musical point of view, because David used this word corrupt. Yeah, I mean, we can open not even a can of worms, a barrel of worms. We can open talking about this. But there is one thing, I have listened to, never seen, but I've listened to the French version with dialogues. And actually, the first time that I heard Medea, obviously, was in Italian, was one of the many versions of Callas. And I have to tell you, I didn't know, I was very young, but I didn't know that the recitativi were not of Cherubini. When I learned that the recitativi were not of Cherubini, I was really amazed, because honestly, from the point of view of the writing, of the musical writing and the orchestral writing, the vocal writing, doesn't make a difference. They're really written very well. And actually, Sondra will vouch for this, a big part of the dramatic moments happened in the recitativi. So I really think it helps a lot to enhance the character of Medea and all the story.
Let's talk for a moment about the characters of your characters. So Medea is does a lot of bad things. She tortures Glauce on her wedding night to death. She not to, and not to mention all the other horrible things we've heard. So how do you find your way into a character like that? Besides you, Sondra, you find something sympathetic about her as well, though, obviously.
Absolutely, and it's been a progression getting to this role. I would not have sung Medea, for instance, without singing Norma first, vocally, but also dramatically. You have to have a certain abandonment that you can just go on stage and be willing to do just about anything, acting-wise, vocally, all of that. So how do I go about doing these bad things? I was a drama major when I was in college as well as a vocal major. And I really learned a lot about how to open certain boxes at certain times with certain emotions in it. And it protects me because as a singer, we all know we can't be standing on stage crying or screaming our heads off because this vocal apparatus right here will not function. So you have to have these memories or these personal life experiences, which I've had quite a few in my life, and you open that box and you allow that emotion to kind of come through you because Cilea says it in Adriana Lecouvreur, Io son l'umile ancella. I'm just the humble servant. And so I allow these emotions to come through me, and then I close that box. Because if I truly tried to play a mother who kills her children, I would be in the fetal position for a week. And thinking about killing this lovely woman next to me, the way that I killed her is horrible. So yes, it's acting, but it's also taking my life experiences and allowing them to flow through me, and for me to relate certain things that happen in my life, and using that emotion, but not the experience.
Right, but I just want to say to Peter's point about like one of the things that I think you do well as I'm looking at you and watching you, like we see there's yet kindness in her and real humanity and love, and so without that, it's tough. The journey that you go on is way less interesting when you arrive at the end, and the only possible solution is the death of Glauce and the kids. I mean, like, without seeing you in love, it's tough to make that. And like one of the things you do really well, in that aria, which I'm on stage during that aria. I didn't do it here, but during that aria, I'm on stage, and one of the, there's real moments where I weaken. And I remember, and I feel, and I have to stop it. And without that, the ending is way less interesting, So you bring that really well to life, as I'm watching you.
Yeah, and it's all about every character. One has to find the journey that the character has to take. And David, I'm going to have a love fest now with him. He is the king, the master of finding that journey for each character, individual journey, and it'll be a different journey for me than, say, somebody else who does this production later on, because David knows all of us so well, but also he pushes us to outside of our comfort zone. And that's really the sign of a great director, is someone who doesn't allow you to pull off your standard emotions and gestures and all of that. And David really pushes us for more and to strive for more. And that's why I've done 14 productions with him, because he's so brilliant. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I would certainly second that from the perspective of general manager. Matthew, so your character is not exactly
a ray of light.
A ray of light. You're used to playing heroic tenors. How does it feel to be playing one who is sort of irredeemable?
Well, it's funny because when we were doing Don Carlo in the spring or late winter, early spring, someone said to me, "Oh, are you looking forward to being the bad guy?" And I thought, well, I only knew the story, but I never thought of Giasone as a bad guy. Just somebody who was, I guess, looking out for his own interests, which makes him bad in one way, but not necessarily morally bankrupt. So, I wish that, I wish for him and for the children that Giasone had made different choices. It's too bad that it went the way it went. And David probably talked about what happens to Giasone afterwards. Did you talk about it? I don't know if that he becomes homeless and bankrupt and he eventually, I forget how he dies.
Well done.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Score one for Medea.
Score one for Medea, exactly. Anyway, no, again, I'm only trying to think about it from the most human and relatable way possible, and try to be as firm and keep standoffish with you as I can be, and as loving to you as I can be. But I mean, even in the second duet, when he basically says to her, "That's it. You'll never touch your children ever again. I will see you killed," basically, and even as he says it, something breaks inside of him, and he has to go back and say, "All right, I know I'm a complete jerk for saying it. You can have the kids for one day," which of course was a fateful decision, and really just looking for the most human thing that I can find so that people can relate.
And Janai, tell us about your character, who seems relatively innocent compared to the two on your right and left.
Yes, I get to play the innocent one. No, actually, it's interesting. When I was learning Glauce, I did see her as innocent, but of course I knew once I got with David, because I've had the pleasure of working with him before, he does push you to go that extra step, and I really got to dig deeper into what she's feeling, because at the moment, everything she's feeling like it's her wedding day. She's supposed to be excited, but she just feels this looming presence of Medea. And she can't even enjoy her wedding day. But it's been a remarkable journey for me because she's not just innocent. I think she has to conjure the strength in her after she has her meltdown to trust Giasone, that he's going to be there for her, look after her, and kind of try to put this looming shadow of Medea behind her so that she can step into this new role. And I think she really does try to by that point, after she panics and he reassures her that, "I got you, everything's going to be okay." She gets that glimpse, that moment of happiness, and then we all know how it turns out after that. But it's been fun.
You know, we're running out of time, but I would like David, if you would, to speak to your, since Sondra spoke so beautifully about your directing, what do you, when you're directing these wonderful performers in a new production like this, what are you thinking about? What is going through your head from the beginning to the process?
I'm thinking about when the premiere is. I'm thinking about managing time and about organizing our time and about saying the most useful thing that I can say within the rehearsal time that is allotted to us, and how far I can possibly go in a day before I have to sort of like call it quits and go like, okay, that was enough pressure for one day. I'm going to save it for the next day. And then, but I may warn them like, okay, this is fine for today, but tomorrow, we're really going to go there. The thing about doing an opera like this is you're dealing with myth. If you think about all the Greek myths, the characters are always in extremis. If you think about Medea's story, think about Orestes and Electra's story. If you think about Oedipus's story, these are characters who are always pushed to the limits of human experience. And that is the purpose of myth, because it opens windows onto souls. It allows us to imagine ourselves pushed to the absolute limit of human experience. And then when we discuss it, I mean, we're joking with you. We're doing this with levity because it's more fun to do this. But we're not just dealing with Italian opera. We're actually dealing with Greek myth. We're actually dealing with the fundaments of theater, why we make theater, what theater is ultimately about. And it's about casting a spotlight onto who we are. And that becomes sometimes a very, very scary space in the rehearsal room. So my job is to acknowledge that it's scary, acknowledge the boundaries, to be able to check out when I think people are getting too close to something, too upset about something, and just giving them the mental space to process, think about it, come back, and then we can push a little bit further. So, I mean, I've loved directing this. This has been, I told you at the beginning, this is really me. And I love all these people here, because they're great.
Bravo. So, Sondra, since this is your moment as Medea in this great role, you have the final word.
Yeah, right. No, honestly, I want all of you, when you come see the show, because I'm sure all of you are going to come see the show, to think about not the wickedness and the evilness of Medea, which we have this thought about Medea being this evil, wicked woman. But I want you to instead look at Medea in a different light, as a woman who's in love. She's in love with her husband. She's in love with her children. And she ultimately kills her children because she has no other choice. So when you see this opera, don't think about her being this witchy, I didn't hear anything about what you were talking about, this evil, wicked, witchy lady, who's going to stalk the stage. We want to show the human side of her. We want to see that she has emotions as everyone else does. And her journey, as I mentioned so many times, her journey is a great one. And the things she has to sacrifice ultimately in her life, bit by bit, one thing after another keeps getting taken away from her. And to listen to the music, that's the other thing I want to say. The music will tell you what's going to happen before it happens. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you all so much, and thank you all for being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at the Met.